Hello everyone, welcome back to the show. This is your host Ashish, and today we have on the show Mr. Rahul Saria, who is head of finance at Vedantu and has led multiple finance teams in various startups. He's currently running his own firm by the name of Funcurious. We have had interesting conversation. We have talked about why CAs should look apart from the accounting roles, how they can find out these roles in startups, and also have tried to understand from Rahul's perspective that where the growth lies for CAs. So Rahul, welcome to the show and thank you so much for taking time out. It's my pleasure to host you, and I know you from long, so I know your journey, the kind of thought process you carry around the finance role, and the kind of leadership roles you have been into. So we can learn a lot from you. That's why I thought it would be perfect to host you on the show. Let's talk about your journey till now and how it has been.
To start with, thank you very much for inviting me. Lovely talking to you, and thanks for the green tea. I love the topic green tea with Ashish. Talking about my journey, it has been very sporadic. I would say, seen some very highs, some very lows in my life. To start with, from the very childhood, my dad has pushed me into typical Marwari dad. He pushed me into business. So by the time I was even in my class sixth or seventh, I used to run the calculator so fast. He used to push me, though the business was not that big in terms of scale, but he ensured that I learn everything from the basics of stock counting to how is accounting done. By the time when I started my CA, when my friends were struggling with what's input output on be it VAT, sales tax, or GST, I already knew all this, and those things were cakewalk. So I think, though I did not like it much when I was a child, but later on realized no, that's what when you connect the dots, it was really helpful. Post that I've been lucky, I would say God's grace has been on me. I was all India rank holder in all my examinations, professional examinations, be it CA, CS. After qualifying, I started my own practice. In between, took some really great stints, like worked in a big four named Deloitte in the taxation team. Did my own consulting. Did not do well. Kind of, you can call me a failed entrepreneur. Then this startup work caught me, and eventually I ended up heading finance for multiple startups, global and Indian both. And finally, here I am. So today I do consulting for multiple startups. I would call it pre-series B startups, and helping people has been my passion always. So I love juggling, a hustler, keep on learning. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. You before we go into other questions, why did you start this particular thing? So I think it's called FinCurious, the venture which you have started. So what was your thought process behind starting that? Because you were doing good in your career and you were heading finance team in Vedantu, and then you decided to do this. So what was your thought process behind it?
So, to name the word that Fincurious, it was coined using two different words, that is finance and curiosity. So, when
Right.
you combine both, the word was coined as Fincurious, which is a trademark that is owned by me. And plus, then I thought, so when I was helping this multiple, so basically, when I was heading finance for multiple startups, that really gave me good exposure. But I realized that there is a huge dearth of good finance people, persons in the industry. And specifically, when you're in an early stage or a pre Series B company, when they are not able to afford a very high cost finance leader, that is where I saw a huge gap which is available in the industry. And I thought, and plus, as I mentioned, since I'm a hustler and I like doing multiple tasks at a time rather than sticking to one particular office, and I find myself to be very, very boring when it comes to I need to go and sit in the same office or the same chamber or talk to the same set of people. That is when I thought, no, let's do something where I can solve multiple problems, help multiple people, simultaneously be happy from inside. That was the whole idea behind this.
Right. And you have also written a book around it. Can you talk about that a little bit? I think the book is also named FinCurious, so we would love to know more about it.
Oh yeah, sure. So yeah, book, you have rightly pointed out the book's name I have purposefully kept as FinCurious again. In fact, my company's name also happens to be FinCurious Consulting Private Limited.
Right.
Again, the idea was because since I am curious, so these are again a bit of story behind releasing this book. So obviously, I'm not a writer. This is the first book, first trial at my hand. Though I've written multiple articles all along my journey, but not really a book.
Right.
So I take a lot of sessions in various colleges, schools, corporate, etc. But when I went to so many engineering colleges, I saw there are brilliant ideas. So it's a misnomer that only IITs pass outs really create great businesses. That's not the case. There are really multi-talented people even in other engineering colleges, for that matter. So when I used to take these sessions and they used to come up with ideas, I got really excited that these young kids have so much of ideas, but when it comes to finance or legal, they get stuck because they have no idea how stocks issued, how valuation is done, how fundraising is done, and it becomes very complex for them. Obviously, these are not the field that they are from. So I
Right.
thought, so I basically started with a thought that I'll write a small 30 to 40 pages a document, which I would just distribute to the students when I go for a session. But
Right.
when I started writing, I realized that 30, 40 pages is not enough, and it was becoming very, very complex. So just to simplify it, so in fact, in my book cover, if you would notice, it's written, "Let's keep it simple." The idea is to, in a simplistic way, how can we help the wannabe entrepreneurs or maybe a early stage entrepreneur to take their journey from X to 10x. That's the
Right.
whole idea behind the book, and it's written in a very simple language and in very short self-help book, so that people even who don't like reading much, they should be curious enough to at least pick that book and just learn something which would help them in the business.
Right, right, and I have read your blogs and I have also heard you in various forums. So I think the way you speak and the the simplistic way you put finance in, I think the book would have a great content in it, and I would recommend everybody to read it. So coming back to the point where so let's talk about the current situation in the market. So Yes Bank has gone to become a no bank now, and people are so there are investors who have invested in Yes Bank. So mostly there are retail investors who have invested in it. There are people who are thinking that they'll get their account holders, so they are thinking they'll get their money back or not. So though RBI has said a lot of things, SBI also did a press conference today or yesterday. They said that they will invest into it and everything would be normal. So what's your thought process around that?
So I think, see, once something has happened, it's very easy to blame multiple agencies at play, right? Be it auditors, be it people who are in charge of governance, etc. But I think let's take a step back. What was the real thought process behind this? So the promoter, Mr. Rana Kapoor, I think he was very ambitious, but ambition without ethics sometimes, not sometimes, in fact, always fails. This is a very classic example of the same. So they were growing very fast, and in the market, it was always a rumor that when all other banks tell you no, you go to Yes Bank, they say yes. So that is the where the whole of this NPA saga, not so good, I would say. In fact, bad assets started creating, and there it was building upon. Now, had this thought process not been there, this would not have been there. And in fact, I would say, if you see the market cap of Yes Bank from the investor's perspective, from 90,000 crore, it has come down to, I think, around somewhere around 19,000 crores. And now SBI is being forced to, I would say, by the government to take a 50% stake at just 2,500 crore, which is like, if you see, there is huge investor money that has been lost. Coming back to depositors or the people, see, though the quality of the assets were very bad, but I feel they have done a tremendous job into expansion. So they are expanding. They have really expanded really well across the country, and they have huge number of branches, huge quality number of. So employees are good. Their overall infrastructure is very good. So SBI taking that over would actually really create much value, which I feel, though it may take some time. And since now RBI has stepped in at least well before time, and hopefully it's not like the ILFS and DHFL when things are very late, though it's quite late, but still, I feel that depositors and the customers would be safer. But investors, no one can help them now, I guess. What's gone, gone. And all those who are stuck with a huge investment in this company, it will take good time to return.
Recover, yeah. Yeah, I think that it will definitely take some time to recover that particular amount of money.
Yeah.
We might have to wait and see. That's the best approach in terms of Yes Bank. Coming back to the CA world of ours, you have worked with Big Fours, and then you jumped onto the startup world, and you took multiple roles, grew in the hierarchy, and then led the finance teams. So, as per you, as a CA, where does the growth lie? Does it lie with big fours? Does it lie with startups? Does it lie within the industry? So, which role is is good from the learning perspective, from the growth perspective, and also on the other side, I would like to understand that how different the finance roles are in startups, in big fours, and in the industry.
Oh, that's a very interesting question, in fact. So, to answer that, in fact, forget about CA or a particular industry. What I feel, considering India's population today, we are, I'm not sure, maybe 1.4 billion people, which is huge, right? So, whatever field one chooses, the problem is that there would be huge competition. Now, if you want to survive and grow significantly, you have to be at top of that. So, my advice to anyone, if someone would want to take it, would whatever field you choose, you have to stay invested into it and be very clear that you are passionate enough that you love doing what you are doing. Once you
Right.
start doing what you love, automatically the things would become clear and you would grow. Coming to a specific question about chartered accountants, they know right and wrong answer. Depending on what, again, the interest lies. If someone is very, very much interested into one niche area, say, for example, taxation or maybe audit for that matter, one can always join a big four where you will get to learn a lot of good quality work. And in later point on, there is huge scope because partners make huge money, good money, in, I would say, in big fours. And even I would say one level below, partners make really good money. But it's a long journey before one becomes a partner, right? Simultaneously, some CAs I have seen, they play a good role in the big four for initial, say, 8 to 10 years, and then move to industry where they get a better work-life balance, and simultaneously they make good money as well. Now, when it comes to startup, it's very different, and I can easily compare a large organization versus a startup. So, in a large organization, what happens? You get to work in again a particular area in which you may specialize, and plus you may become an expert. Where in a startup, you need to be a hustler. So there are so many fields of work that you get to do, and you get to see from the business perspective as well. So there's a very stark difference which I noticed in my last decade's journey, a comparison between a large org versus a startup. So what happens in a startup? Initially, things are very, very fast. So you got an idea, you straight away call a meeting in a room. Maybe in 2 hours you do that meeting. In 1 week you can just start. So it's so agile that you can implement new things very fast, right?
Right.
Vis-a-vis, in case of a larger org, sometimes you have very good idea, all your managers agree, all your colleagues agree, but everyone knows that this wouldn't happen because the processes are so complex, and sometimes it takes multiple quarters to implement something very basic also.
Right.
But so this sounds like obviously startup is better because it's agile, small, and growth is faster, right? But eventually we see that 90% of the startups fail, and these larger organs are larger because of same processes and same policies driven, which looks like a hurdle in case of startup. So the whole idea is initially you need to be very fast, agile, and simultaneously keep your targets towards faster growth, but controlling your all the policies and processes well in time. So obviously you need to give some leeway there, but slowly keep a tab on how are we moving far. Once the companies who are able to take control of both of these, so there is always a trade-off between control as well as growth.
Growth.
The one who can balance this properly, that company can grow really well. So I think from a career perspective, obviously my personal choice would be startups. But for budding chartered accountants, my advice would be maybe work for 2 to 3 years in a big four to gain that, to see the larger how larger corporates work, how professionally one can work, and then jump into a startup to learn from the nuances of business, which big four may not give.
Mhm. So I myself have worked in a big four and I have talked to a lot of CAs. So what happens is that they come and they tell me that we are limited to a particular job role. So
Exactly.
there might be somebody who will be working in indirect tax. So he or she might not be exposed to business tax or audit or some other roles which are very important while you move to a startup. So
Right.
they face a lot of difficulties while making these job changes, and they almost always end up working for a big four because
Mhm.
they see that there's no other growth at the end of the day. They'll if they just know about indirect tax. So how to solve that kind of a problem where you are just exposed to one thing and you are
Mhm.
not getting to learn or not getting to know what other roles are. So
Yeah, yeah.
what's your thought process around that?
So, so that's a very interesting question again, and precisely why I say that when I say that initially, I did not mean that one needs to spend 8 to 10 years in a big four. Then definitely you become very niche to one particular area. But my point is, why don't you start in a big four with one particular area, say it audit or taxation or indirect taxation, for a year or two, just to get that glimpse of how a professional works, how do you present yourself, and how do you perceive a macro problem or a macro solution to a larger problem, right? Simultaneously, if someone is working in a particular area, you cannot limit yourself to that area only. The
Right.
whole idea is behind keeping yourself updated with multiple new things and keep on reading what you do. So,
Right.
like I'll give you my example. Though I have worked in multiple different industries, I always ensure that I am a avid reader. When I say reader, technical, non-technical, both. Non-technical can be helpful using like videos like yours, the interviews that you do, or maybe some motivational videos in YouTube, or even on the technical side, there's so much of content available. It's all about, so maybe if you spend 3 hours on Netflix, why don't you spend at least 1 hour on something technical to learn about? Or
Right.
maybe something on your personality development. So
Right.
you need to have a very clear cut idea what is happening around everything, around different subjects. Say for example, if I'm an audit person, I should know what are the changes coming up in direct tax, be it indirect tax, and keep on reading about this or listening about it, or maybe attend seminars extra. So till the time you are able to update yourself on what's happening around, it's easy to get into a startup. Secondly, it all depends again. Again, Ashish, I would like to repeat. It's always a trade-off between growth and money. And for personally, money is always a consequence for me. That if you think that money is the primary motive, then this switch becomes difficult. When someone wants to jump from a big four or a industry, one larger corporate to a startup, why don't you take a hit if required and straight away jump into the good job profile rather than seeking a short term money and foregoing your long term career? So if you are able to take a small hit, maybe if not a larger one, because there may be multiple factors, and still you choose something to learn more rather than take a short term money. I'll give my example. When I qualified my CA, I got a all India highest domestic package. I was placed through the campus placement. I worked in that company only for 8 months because I did not like the work because I was not learning enough. And from there, I moved to Deloitte at half the package for double the work. So, which I think that, in fact, I remember the partner at Deloitte. So all the technical rounds went very smoothly. The partner asked me just one question. At such a young age, how can you come down to such a low salary? I said, sir, I'm very passionate. That's the reason I want to learn more. He said, no, I don't agree. And to your point, and I don't buy that point. But anyways, you're most welcome. So I joined Deloitte that way. So I think that has paid
But
off.
yeah, I think that's really hard to believe. Also, at the end of the day, when you see that somebody, so we always see, that you are earning 10 lakhs, 15 lakhs, and you always want to go on a 30% hike, and somebody is coming from like 15 or 20 lakhs and wants to join on a lesser salary. It would be a shock for the partner. And as a CAs, nobody thinks that, they always think
Exactly.
about money and how to manage money and stuff, and they thinking that to reduce money. I think that's a great thought process you have, and that's why
And
you
in
have.
fact, just to add on, and for
Yeah,
double the work, because big fours don't spare you.
yeah, exactly. And
It's
the
it's like taking a step back for taking a longer run.
right, and I think the kind of thought process you had since the beginning that helped you to take right decisions, and I think it's more important to know that what is better for you at the end of the day. Uh,
Exactly.
so, uh, another point, Rahul, how is the finance role changing? Like, how has it changed from over the years? Now, what are the changes now happening currently in the finance role? So, if you can throw some light on that.
Oh, actually, big time. There's a big time change. There was a time when finance was limited to. When I say finance, I'm limiting to. I'm focused more towards chartered accountant because
Yeah.
CFA has not been so much prevalent in India. But of
Right.
late, obviously, CFAs and other CMA roles are picking up. Uh,
Mhm.
so, but in India specifically, finance was mostly limited to either accounting, controllership activity, taxation, or a bit of, you can call it, treasury. But of late, all the businesses have realized, the startup ecosystem has realized that finance cannot be limited to only these limited area or maybe some part of legal. There are so many new avenues that has opened up, and plus there is a lot of business understanding that is required. So today, a finance professional, I call it like from controllership or a munim to a strategic finance. So
Yeah.
when I talk about strategic finance, you need to talk business, you need to understand business. When you speak to promoters, founders, or business owners, they have a single motive, that is to run their business well and make profits. Now, running their business well and making profit, there's a huge finance role that can be played as a strategic finance. So in strategic finance, what I mean, say for example, a company, there may be 10 different business metrics that a founder may want to track and improve. Now,
Right.
those 10 metrics are important from a business perspective, from profitability perspective, or maybe growth perspective. But when it comes from the fundraising perspective, an investor may not want to look at those 10, but some two key headline metrics may be very, very important. Now, a finance person can actually help the founder identify what are these two important metrics, which would help both. One, help us scale in terms of revenue growth, as well as maintain our profitability, as well as would help the investors understand our business well, because every industry is different and every metric may be different.
Right.
That's one. Secondly, as a finance professional, we can help big time into business finance, into financial planning and analysis, into fundraising, into treasury management. Again, the controllership activities, though they are very, very important, but those always take a backseat, because in a room when you sit where the I would say the elephant in the room is the business decision, because if the business grows, everything follows. When the business grows, so all the decision has to be from the perspective of growth of business. Simultaneously, at the back of the mind, you cannot say that I don't know tax, because if there's a negative implication of taxation or some accounting rule, you need to know that so that you do not fall back on and then make a big mistake.
Right.
So
And
overall, as a finance head or a business head or a CFO, uh, I would say if someone eyes to become a CFO, definitely you need to know all these areas in parts and have a good control, or at least at a, I would say, 10,000 feet level knowledge of every area in your domain.
right, and I think you rightly said, and I think it's not just finance. I think every role now needs an understanding of business,
Business, yeah.
because even if you are in a technology role or you are in a finance role, if you don't understand business, you'll not be able to grow in that role, because it's really required at the end of the day from the business. Because nowadays companies are asking everybody to contribute in business, and if you are not contributing in business, that's not a growth path at the end of the day. So thank you, Rahul, for sharing that with us. Coming back to a article which you recently wrote for the fresh graduates on CAs, that where they can identify or go into the fields which are not particular to CAs. So can
Mhm.
you throw some light on that, or can you share some important points from that particular article?
So as I just mentioned, uh, unfortunately, CAs has been always seen as accountants. Though the subject area and if you see the syllabus of chartered accountant, it's very vast. It expands to taxation, it expands to financial management, it expands to strategic financial management. But again, unfortunately, this has been limited to accounting and taxation only, as I just mentioned. And there are areas on as of fundraising, business finance, FP&A. There's a lot of analysis that can be done, which has got more value. If precisely if you see the market, most, I wouldn't say not all, but most of the chartered accountants end up becoming a finance controller in a business, in a firm or a company, rather than and when you see, if someone needs to hire a CFO, the first choice would be an MBA, not a chartered accountant. That's again, I'm not saying that it's 100%, but I would easily I can say it's more than 60 to 70%. That's the
Right.
case. To change that, I think chartered accountant need to understand more of business, do more analysis, and learn about fundraising, which is exactly why I've covered in my, even again in my book, that if someone wants to create a make a career in finance, when I say finance, pure finance, apart from controllership only. These are topics have been covered at length, that how do you actually understand business, what are the things, what are the jargons being used, how do you negotiate with an investor, what is the thought behind investor who is investing in a startup, etc. So these are the new areas which we need to take care. And once you understand this, there's no limitation. As finance professionals, why should we limit only to finance domain? Why can't we become entrepreneurs? There are a lot of chartered accountants who have been, let's say, for example, Motilal Oswal. I think the founder is a chartered accountant. So there
Yeah.
are other businesses which actually have been created by chartered accountants, which are thriving. So
Yeah.
One can always become an entrepreneur or a finance professional rather than only becoming an accountant.
Right. And so, last question from my side, Rahul,
Sure.
that you are guiding and you are acting as a virtual CFOs for a lot of startups who are early, pre-stage B of funding. So, what's your advice to early stage startups in terms of funding?
Okay, that's an interesting one. Don't build businesses to raise funds, but if you're getting funds, do grab it.
Right. And there's another thought process which I keep hearing, that you should be always ready to raise funds. And how can a startup which wants to raise funds, what are some important things they should keep in mind before they go for fundraising, as per
I
you?
think they need to read my book.
They have to read your book. Okay. Thank you so much, Rahul, for sharing all those views with us. And I think a great set of knowledge you shared with us. And I think the people who will view this episode will learn a lot. Any last comments you would like to make, or anything else you would like to share with the viewers?
I think we are in the best of times. I think if you see the history of humanity, at least in India, we are the most convenient generations of all. Everything is available at use of technology, etc. We should make best out of it. Huge population. One may see that as a competition or as an opportunity. I see that as an opportunity. Huge scope, and we should try to create more entrepreneurs rather than job seekers. The more entrepreneurs we create, more jobs we create, and that would pave the way to growth of our country as well as human beings.
Yeah. Thank you so much, all. That's a great thought process you have. And we got a lot of knowledge out of this episode and while talking to you. And I think we'll catch up again. Thank you so much for coming on the show.